So I am very excited to bring up the gentleman standing next to me. We are thrilled to have Steve Spinner with us this morning. I said earlier that we wouldn't be reading any bios, but if you'll indulge me in this case, I'd like to touch on just a few highlights. Steve is the founder and CEO of RevUp Software, a leading data analytics software company right here in Redwood City. Steve was previously involved in angel investing and was an advisor to over 50 startups. He also has been a senior executive in a host of technology and media companies over the years. In his personal time, Steve is one of the most sought-after political strategists and fundraisers in the country, having led Obama's fundraising efforts in 2008 and 2012, and most recently chairing Ro Khanna's congressional race. I first learned about Steve through an article in Bloomberg News earlier this year. Let me read you just a quick paragraph. For months, some of Washington's top campaign professionals have been buzzing about a product with the potential to turbocharge political fundraising and possibly much more. The product is a piece of software, an algorithm really, that is a distilled essence of a pioneering approach to fundraising developed by a few Silicon Valley entrepreneurs during Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, an innovation that helped lift him to the presidency. So here to tell us more about his disruptive fundraising, and I need to book some time with you after. Let me turn it over to Mr. Steve Spinner. Steve, thank you for being here.
Hi there. Thank you, everyone. Great. Works behind me. First, let me just start out, and hopefully this is a relatively simple question, and I'll get quite a few hands. So who here has ever done, in their entire lives, any fundraising? Raise your hand. All right. Thank you. Who here in the last year or two has done any type of volunteer fundraising themselves? Okay. Still very high. Who here in their jobs, whether it be elected office, nonprofits, universities, any type of higher ed, who here currently is in the field where they have to do this professionally, where they have to fundraise? Okay, still about 20, 30%. All right, well, thank you very much for having me here. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll go into what we've done. As the title of the talk is, I love fundraising. I've always loved it. It started when I was in 6th, 7th grade. There was an American Cancer Society bike-a-thon in my neighborhood in Long Island, New York, and my mother allowed me to go out door to door, up and down my street, calling some friends and family to do $1 a mile. And my mom thought since I had a 3-speed bike and I didn't bike much, maybe I would do 2-3 miles and that would be it. And lo and behold, we went and I went to about 100 homes and called up people. And I went lap after lap after lap after lap. And at 14 miles, my mom finally shoved me off the bike. And I raised, $1,500, won the contest for the most money raised for the event. And all of a sudden, I got a 10-speed bike as the reward. And so here I am, I'm in 6th grade. I'm like, this is good. I mean, I can do good and I get a reward for this. I like how this works. And right then and there, I fell in love with fundraising. After college, after I'd worked at McKinsey & Company, I wanted to do something different before I went to grad school. And for me, it was a very personal decision. I wanted to work for the Olympics in Atlanta. And I had the privilege, I had the honor of being part of the revenue organization there. I headed up, at all of 22, 23 years of age, I headed up the strategy group for the Olympics on their revenue side. And it was a very tall order for the 1996 games. We had to raise $1.2 billion, and we got no government funding. And on the sports sponsorship side, $650 million of that had to come from our group. Well, the way the math worked at the time, you couldn't do sports sponsorships at the $4 or $8 million levels and add up to 650 unless you had 100 different sponsors, which would be terrible. And so my job, and I realized I had talent for this. A talent for this early on was that I loved thinking differently. And this was way before I moved to Silicon Valley. My job was to take a category like telecommunications and rather than sell it to AT&T for $8 million, say, you know what, you can do long distance, you can do local, you can do equipment, you can do radio, and we made a $100 million set of sponsorships out of formerly an $8 million category. And again, now I was in love, and I was doing it to help the community, help the country through sport, which is something I'm also very passionate about. The problem is, after that, I fell out of fundraising. I got really serious about my career. I went to grad school. I worked at NBC in New York. Through NBC, they had me come out here. I started doing a lot of startups myself. And then after the 2004 election, I literally had done nothing in politics before. I had voted, but that was the extent of my civic engagement. And I felt guilty. In a typical naive Silicon Valley way, I thought, wow, maybe if I had done something in the 2004 election, maybe John Kerry would have won. Okay? Totally naive. So I called up my friends that had been involved in politics and at a leadership level, and I raised my hand. I said, what can I do to help? And they said, come to a couple events and write some checks. So that was in February of 2005. I wrote a couple of checks, and really quickly I said, this is getting expensive. What else can I do? It's getting expensive. So they said, well, if you can't write, you raise. And I go, how do you raise? Figure it out. And there was no best practices. There were no sharing of information, even just from friend to friend. How do you do? What do you do? What works? What doesn't work? No one did that. They just said, here's a link. Go raise money. And I said, is there any tools? Are there any technology? What, are you kidding me? Of course there's not. This is like politics. This is fundraising. We don't do that. And so I very quickly started doing it the old way, the traditional way, the historical way. And thankfully for me, I found out that I had this talent and passion for fundraising for politics. It was highly correlated to raising money for a company to raise money for a candidate. You had to have the same level of passion. You had to be able to stand behind something that you truly, truly believed in. I'm actually getting choked up. And be able to say, I need your help. I want your help. Can you give me 500? Can you give me 1,000? Can you give 2,300? Whatever. And it was just something that I was good at. I could spend a lot of time in it, and I very quickly started having success, being part of successful host committees, doing things at the congressional level, at the senatorial level, at the gubernatorial level. But in late 2006, at the end, it was November of 2006, I said, you know what, I really want to do presidential for the first time ever. And I'm under the radar, no one knows about me. There's something about this guy, Barack Obama. I'd love to get involved early. I mean, it'll be a 3-4 month thing, and we'll probably get squashed like a bug. But it's something I believed in, and I jumped on board. I was one of the first 50 people to have joined that organization. And obviously that didn't turn out that way for the betterment of the world, and he's been our wonderful president for the last 8 years. But that was one where I started, first time ever as a fundraiser for a presidential campaign. And I started small, did my first 50,000, did my next 100,000, did my next 250,000, and just kept going and going. And what was different was that I was the first person to start using social media in fundraising. Started using data to better understand my friends. It sounds pretty obvious. We should all do that. We should all be respectful of our friends, of their time, of their money. But no one had been doing that at the time. And so that allowed me, and by the way, all I'm talking about is I was looking at my LinkedIn profiles, I was calling up people, I was having conversations, I was checking out. In the conversation, I would understand, is it someone that they like to give early or did they like to give late? Were there any causes that they cared about? This person's cares a great deal about climate change. Keep that in the back of my head. This person really likes to attend women's events. This person likes to write small and then write multiple times. All those things I just used to keep in my head or on a pad. But that simple set of just being respectful to my friends and my network allowed me to then be one of the top fundraisers in the 2008 campaign. In 2012, I had a greater leadership position, and they asked me in this case to train others, to teach others to do what I did. But again, it was still without a technological solution. It was still laborious. It was still meeting with people, talking with them, asking questions, knowing what they cared about, but tailoring the ask, making it more targeted. And this all changed after the 2012 election. When Ro Khanna decided he wanted to run, he's a dear friend of mine, and I was supportive of that race, he had no staff. Any good Democrat finance person was not really allowed to work for Ro. So how could he run a competitive campaign in an extremely expensive market with no staff? And he put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I helped him with that. And we just started having tons of meetings, a lot of fundraising events. But for Ro and for many of us here, and this is not about politics. What I'm going to talk to you about, please put on, if you're in the nonprofit space, put on your nonprofit hat. It's the same thing for you, how it can be customized. If you're in the higher ed space, it's the same thing for you. But the analogy in the demo I'm going to give you is absolutely in the political space. He had to do events. He had to have supporters, whether he asked of them or they offered themselves, he needed them to raise their hand. He needed to say, I will help you. I will host an event. I will co-host an event. I don't have time to do something in my home, but I'll give you 25 names. I'll give you 50 names of people for you to call. He had to figure out a way to have volunteers help him. And the story that the problem with fundraising is that typically, advancement staff, finance staff, they're overworked, they're underpaid, they're undertrained, and they're not given tools, at least not technical tools, similarly or not nearly as quickly as if they were in the business-to-business community, where data analytics is all the rage. I mean, if you work in luxury goods, they're using data analytics like crazy. They know exactly who here is going to be willing to buy a Gucci pocketbook in the next 6 months. I mean, business communities use data analytics very, very effectively. But that had never yet gotten to nonprofits, higher ed, or political. So the best in political, if you think about it, the last time you raised for a candidate, the last time the candidate raised for him or herself, the last time you got an invite to something, what was it? You typically probably got an email from someone. In most cases, it was probably a blast spam email to hundreds, if not thousands of people. It told a story of why you were supporting this candidate, and it gave a link. And that was it. That is less than, it's 0.013% of yield. Okay, so you're spamming. You're doing one level above the campaign spam blast, but it's not really targeted. But if you were to just customize that top line of an email and say, Jim, great seeing you last Thursday. I know you like to support candidates early in the cycle. Got one for you. Now your yield is going to be 15, 25, in some cases over 50% yield. That takes work. That takes time. Who has time to do that? So it's not about sending out 1,000 emails. It's sending out 25, 50, 100 targeted emails, which for me allowed me to be very successful in the Obama campaign, which for Ro allowed him to be exceedingly successful running for a congressional campaign. But again, it still was not from a technology perspective. And the light bulb for me went off when we had a very famous venture capitalist, I don't want to embarrass him, so let's just call him Sam. Sam offered to do a fundraiser for Ro. And he said, well, what's the max I can do? And the answer at the time was $5,200. Great, can my spouse give? Great, that's $10,400 from me. What else can you do? What else can I do for you? Well, can you open up your home and invite some of your friends? Could we do, ideally we need a $50,000 fundraiser to meet our budget. And he said, he looked at us, he said, you know who I am. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for my fund. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for various portfolio companies. Ask me, I'll raise you $500,000. And we went back and forth on this because, as everyone knows, politics is different than business. Politics is different than other types of fundraising. There are caps, there's partisanship, there's sensitivities between who you ask and what you ask of people. This guy just basically said, look, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to raise you all this money. And this started 3 weeks out. With 3 days to go, Sam had a total of $16,000 in the pot that he had raised. And he's freaking out. And he's calling his friends in South Africa, can you wire $10,000? Another company, can you do $5,000? Another person, can you do $1,000 here, $1,000? He's sweating it. Now, Wednesday, the event comes and goes, and it's a wonderful event, and we raised $63,000, and so I'm happy, Ro's happy. But Sam has aged literally 10 years in the process. I mean, he looks crappy for his own event. And he comes up afterwards, and he said to me, and this is from one of the best tech investors in the world, he said, I will never do this again. This was a complete waste of my time. I have never been so humbled, so frustrated at any process in my life. When I send out an email, I get a response. Professionally, personally, politically, people weren't responding to me. I would have to send them a follow-up, and then they would say, really psyched that you're supporting Ro. Glad you're doing an event. Well, what does that mean? Are you going to come? Are you going to pay? So he's like, I have no idea. I'm sitting there going, I have no idea who of my friends care about politics. I don't know who of my friends have ever written a check to politics. I don't know who's a Dem. Oh, I could invite someone who's a Republican. I could, they could be perturbed with me. I don't know who's given to Roe. That's kind of a waste of time if I reach out to someone who's already maxed out. Oh my God, I could reach out to someone who's given to his opponent, and then they'll really be upset with me. And what every person does, they go through that litany of questions, and they push their computer away, and they go, I'll come back tomorrow. They procrastinate. That simple act of pushing your computer away when you initially are ready to go. You got everything. You got your email, you got your link, you're ready to go. But that simple discomfort causes that fundraising effort to fail by 50% right there. And every day that you continue to procrastinate, add another 5%. So the goal of fundraising, the goal is to make this efficient, to have high yield, and for me, and what's the cornerstone of everything I live by, is to be respectful. Be respectful. Have the right person make the right ask to the right person at the right time. You do that, you will fund your nonprofit, you will fund your university or your school, and if you're a candidate, money will not be the reason to raise your hand to run for election or for office or not. And that's the number one reason people choose to run or not to run. Can I raise the stinking money? That's not the reason. You should run because you want to run. You should run because you think you can make a difference. And money should not play that role. So this is about lowering the bar. This is about saying, I'll raise what I need to raise to get out my message. And, thank you. He's good at that. And so that's what the vision of RevUp software was about. And now, if you'll give me the privilege here, let me show you what we did. So RevUp software is data analytics. It is not the money. We're not the crowdfunder, we're not NGP, we're not any of the companies that the money goes through for the transaction. We're not the system of record. We're data analytics. We are a tool for staff to act more intelligently and more efficiently, but most importantly, my passion is we're a tool to give volunteers in any line of what they're trying to do, give them the tools so that they can be in 5 minutes, in 15 minutes, do more than they ever could have done if they committed 15, 25 hours to it. So with that, I'll just show you one. We had over 50 clients in the last year. I'm just going to show you this one because it's been in the news recently. So this is a political version of it, Ro Khanna for Congress. When a client signs up with us, when they reach out to us, the software needs to understand who's the client. How do we differentiate this person, this client, versus 1,000 other clients? So this only takes 3-4 minutes of customization, but it's required. So our team does it with the client. Ro Khanna, he's a South Asian male. He's 40 years old, born in Philadelphia. He's a Democrat running as a challenger to the incumbent for California House 17 at a federal level. 5,400 is the maximum contribution. He went to Chicago undergrad, Yale Law School, and his opponent was Mike Honda. But then this is what we call correlated campaigns, and this is completely flexible. You can add, take away. These are individuals, elected officers, other candidates who the client believes they're highly correlated with. So that if someone were a donor to one of these folks, if but they knew of Roe, they'd probably be interested in supporting Roe. And then here are some of the key issues that this campaign is about. Okay, so now the software, the algorithm, knows uniquely who the client is. And again, nonprofits, universities, same exact customizations. So every client gets a certain number of licenses, in this case 10. So I'm given one of them, this is live, and allows me with one click of a button to upload my LinkedIn contacts, my Gmail, my Outlook, my vCard, if I've got any spreadsheets. As we go mobile, we'll also be able to add Facebook right now. And it allows me to, in my case, I uploaded nearly 3,000 LinkedIns, 6,500 my personal Gmail, 1,400 of my professional Gmail. It dedupes them, it cleans them up. And when I click on Analyze, it then goes out to 150 political giving databases, federal, state, all 50 states, and over 100 municipalities. But then it also goes out to nearly 9,000 charitable giving databases. And with that, it takes those 9,000 plus databases, puts it against my 7,400 net contacts, puts it against the unique profile I just showed you, and here are my contacts, my friends, uniquely ordered highest to lowest, likely to be interested in supporting Ro Khanna, the client. And this is page 1, and it's 25 per page, and I've got 300 pages. We're not going to go through 300, trust me. But the way to read this is synced up with your account. So this knows if someone's given in the past, given in the present to the client, in this case, Ro Khanna. John Doerr has given he's been quite generous the last couple of years. He's maxed out, so that's why he's got 0 capacity remaining. I'm not going to reach out to him. Now, Imad, on the other hand, has given in the past. That's low-hanging fruit. Go get him. Click. David, on the other hand, has never given in this race, so that's greenfield. That's a brand new person that's a good high prospect. I may want to reach out to him. Laura is someone who has given, and she has remaining capacity, so I may not want to reach out to her. But now, Wayne is someone who's a dear friend, who's a supporter of the opponent. I no longer will reach out to him. I will be respectful. I will not piss off a friend, which is one of the worst things that you can do in political fundraising. And so that's just an early warning that, to skip him. And Oren is someone who has never given in this race, but has given to other similar races. So if he's interested in Raja, maybe he'll be interested in Ro. Click. Now, any one of these folks that I want to know more information about, so let's say, let's say Ron Conway is an example. Sorry, it's the screen here. Oh, can't do it. The screen's not letting me. There we go. Okay. So for Ron Conway, he's given to he supports charter schools, he supports youth programs, gun violence prevention, Clinton Foundation, Tenderloin Development, and then here's all his federal giving on the right, here's state giving, here's local giving. It gives you a good overview of the things that he might care about, he might be interested in. And there's all sorts of other things you can do. You can do various types of filtering. If I just want to go after people that are the low-hanging fruit, people that have given in the past but not currently, one click you can do that. A whole bunch of different things. My favorite is this one called Diamonds in the Rough. What is Diamonds in the Rough? Diamonds is every single person here has given to this client. However, they've given at a level that is statistically significantly less than they typically give to other similar clients. So all you got to do is reach out to them, and they'll probably be likely to give you more. For instance, one of those spam emails, give $50, fine, that one resonated, you write a $50 contribution, now you're in the system. Well, now that person typically writes $2,000, $5,000. Well, if the staff just knows that, now there's a person you should follow up with because they just happen to only give you $50. So there's all sorts of different types of things you can do with filtering. You can do advanced filtering. One of my favorites is, let's say I want to do an event for women, and I can take my 6,000, 7,000 contacts with one click, and now they've all been filtered according to if they're likely to be a woman, and it's 98% accurate from a gender prediction capability. And we can do all sorts of things from geo-targeting, et cetera. But that's the top line of the software. We can do that for nonprofits. We can do that for higher ed. There's one more thing that I'll share here, which was kind of our secret sauce. So here's an individual, Amit Zavery, and I'll end with this and I'll open for questions. Amit's someone who had 3 years ago had never written a check before to politics, ever. This was empty, this was 0, that was empty, and he had a score of 43 and it was purple. Well, why would Amit score 43 if he's never done anything for politics? One would think he would be a 0. Well, a fundraiser, not me, but a South Asian fundraiser reached out to Amit and said, Amit, you're South Asian, you're male, you're in tech, you live in Northern California. You scored 43. You might want to meet this guy, Ro. You might like him. And he did, and he wrote a check, and then he wrote another check, and then this cycle he wrote a number of checks. He even used the software and held a fundraiser in his home, and he raised $35,000. And this is the first time and the only thing he's ever done in fundraising. So for Ro, what we saw was typically in politics, 95% of the money that campaigns raise comes from pre-existing political donors, which is about 1% of the US population. Only 5% is new money in, new blood. And I'm all about growing the pie. It's just, right now, the way the system is, it's just easier if you're a finance person to just poach one another's donors. And that's why so many of us, when you write a contribution, all of a sudden you start getting hit up with emails from people you've never heard about, because a lot of people share lists, and we all hate it. With Ro, only 30% of his donors were pre-existing. 70%, 2 out of 3 of his donors, and he raised nearly $8 million in 4 years, were from first-time donors. And that's good. I'm a Dem. I want that to happen with Dems, but the software is completely nonpartisan or bipartisan. We work with everyone. I like getting new people into the system. And so that's the way the software works. And so, if you can, we had 50 clients last year. We launched, we worked with Purdue University, where they're alpha. Now we're fully commercial on the beta for universities and higher ed. We're working with a number of wonderful nonprofits at the national level, and a couple of local ones are starting to work with us. But the goal for us is to have it be about efficiency, yield, and respect. And with that, I'd love to answer any questions for the last couple of minutes.
All right, any questions for Steve? Let's get a microphone. Sabrina?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It's really well timed since the election just occurred. Having used Nation Builder, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how this technology is different and how possibly the two could work together.
Exactly, yeah, so great question. So Nation Builder does a number of unique functionalities in the space. They would be a system of record. They, in many cases, compete against NGP on the left or against any of the Republican shops. But they don't do data analytics. So they would be a partner of ours where it said row, the data going up and down of who gave in the past, rather than, we work with Nation Builder with a number of clients, that data would come from them, and we supply the data analytics. And so a client who pays Nation Builder, a client that pays NGP on a monthly basis for the ability to have transactions go through their system, they would separately be a customer of ours where they'd be paying us $1,000 a month for 10 licenses for us. So we collaborate on that. Great question.
Other questions?
Yep.
In what way have you thought about the 2018 election and the new American majority, like Steve Phillips and Amy Allison's work to mobilize the new American majority? You said you're going to go mobile. Will that smartphone access be a new approach for the next election?
Yeah, so great question. Again, we are only on the revenue side. We're only on the fundraising side. We don't do field. We don't do any of the wonderful technology that there are a number of great firms that are doing that. But we are going mobile. So what you just saw right now is the desktop version, which is staff and volunteers doing fundraising from their desktop. But what we'll also have in a couple of months, this is our mobile. And upload your contacts, upload your Facebook, analyze my contacts, and here, view my rankings, same thing. Now I can write there, call Kevin if I want to call or text, and if I want to take my call sheets information, have it all be seamless. This app will take something that today is a 15-hour process and do it in about 8 minutes. So, but we are only on the fundraising side.
Any other questions for Steve?
Yep.
One more. Carol Marks. Yep. Carol, I'm going to give you my microphone.
Hi, Steve. That was wonderful. I'm curious, is there training that you also provide for staff that might be making these calls that's a kind of a different nature, not just the use of the software, but...
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So as part of any commercial relationship, it's not that we just give you the software. We have a team of people that help with the onboarding and help with the training. And so as we deploy with you, there's a major training that we do for the staff, and we also let them include as many volunteers as they want. And then we also we bend over backwards and help these folks beyond the initial deployment. And Ashling, who's on my team, who's here, is always on the phone all day long, sharing best practices of the various functionality. I only showed you probably about 50% of what the software does. It's a 5-minute demo. But yeah, no, it's important. A lot of these folks don't use software, or they use software that, I'm not kidding you, looks like it's from 1998. That's the industry, as we all know, especially in the nonprofit space. There's a couple of vendors out there that innovation is not part of their DNA, but they've got large switching costs. So we're here to help, and we have a whole team of people that focus on hand-holding as we get into the 21st century data analytics world.
Okay, let's give Steve Spinner a round of applause. Thank you so much, Steve. That is a very powerful tool on display right there, not only for politicos like myself, but civic organizations. So please check out RevUp.